Does the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg ensure Donald Trump's legacy? The U.S. president says that by the end of the week, he'll be nominating a new Supreme Court justice. If the Republican-controlled Senate approves his pick in time, whether or not Trump's out of a job on November the 4th, he'll have chosen 3 of the 9 justices who sit on the bench. We're talking about lifetime appointments that for decades could shape arguments over issues like deregulation, health care, voting rights, protection of minorities, and abortion. The stakes couldn't be higher, nor more dramatic. Just how much of an icon was Ginsburg to many Americans is a question we'll put to our panel. Her death comes as some states have already started early voting in a year of COVID, California wildfires, and Black Lives Matter protests. Will RBG's legacy and the fight over her succession instantly become the issue of the campaign? More broadly, what does it say about the state of democracy in America ahead of an election that might well be decided in the courts again? Are U.S. institutions, based on a 231-year-old Constitution, solid enough to withstand the partisan power plays unfolding? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Joining us from Silver Springs, Maryland, Caroline Frederickson, visiting professor at Georgetown Law Center. I want to thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Here in the studio, we welcome Stuart Haugen, member of Republicans Overseas. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's good to be back.
Lex Paulson, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. During the primaries, you said you were campaigning for?
Mayor Pete.
Mayor Pete. And in the general election, have you made a pick?
Yes. I think Joe Biden will be a fantastic president. Very happy to support it.
All right. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Even though her poor health was no secret, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg still came as a shock. A women's rights icon who'd broken barriers, first as a legal scholar and attorney, and then as a judge. Alison Sargent has more.
A trailblazing advocate for gender equality and a cultural icon. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whose long and pioneering legal career was driven by her own struggles as a woman in a male-dominated profession. At Harvard Law School, she was one of just 9 women in a class of 500. After graduating from Columbia, top of her class, she still had a hard time finding a job because federal judges didn't want to hire women. In 1972, Ginsburg co-founded the Women's Rights Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. By 1974, the body had participated in over 300 gender discrimination lawsuits. Ginsburg gained a reputation for her slow and steady approach, favoring winnable battles over flashy cases, as she gradually laid the legal foundations for gender equality. In 1993, she was nominated to the Supreme Court by Bill Clinton, making her only the 2nd woman to serve on America's top judicial body. There, she continued to defend women's rights with rulings on controversial issues like abortion, and was renowned for being a great dissenter. When people would ask her how many of the court's 9 seats should be held by women, she always gave the same reply.
When do you think there will be enough? It's obvious. When there are 9.
Her small stature, combined with her refusal to be intimidated, saw her rise to the status of pop culture icon, earning her the nickname Notorious RBG. Donald Trump's nomination of 2 Supreme Court justices left Ginsburg one of 4 progressives crucial to maintaining the balance on the conservative-leaning court. She survived several bouts of cancer and a heart operation and was hospitalized multiple times in recent years. Ginsburg always said she would carry on with her job as long as her health allowed. Well aware that her death or retirement under a conservative president could see the court take a definitive swing to the right, shifting U.S. policy for decades to come and jeopardizing her own progressive legacy.
Caroline Frederickson, for people on this side of the Atlantic, just explain to us how much of an icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg was to many people where you are.
Well, I have to say, I think there are a lot of people in France who'd understand that. I spent the month of October last year in Lyon teaching at Sciences Po Lyon, and found it wonderfully interesting that at two movie theaters in Lyon, the movie about Ruth Bader Ginsburg was playing. And I just thought, in the United States, it's really, one can't even imagine such a situation, a movie about a judge in a foreign country playing in a movie theater that would actually be a popular attraction for people. So I think there's already some sense of her stature. But I mean, she was, she was a completely unique individual in so many ways. I mean, a trailblazer, a warm and compassionate person who was beloved by her, not only her law clerks and people who were on her side, but also close and warm relationship with Justice Scalia when he was alive. She was a woman of great interests, but great accomplishments is what she'll be remembered for. She really led the charge in revisioning how to see women's rights in American jurisprudence, in enabling the court to see beyond the sex discrimination that prevailed and understand how gender stereotypes affect not just women but also men, and using that tactic to appeal to the all-male Supreme Court that she argued for earlier, or argued before earlier in her career when she was an advocate. She advanced the rights of men who had been harmed by discriminatory laws that gave women, for example, custody of children, or gave them government benefits after the passing of a bread-earning spouse, and suggesting that when men were suffering such discrimination, they should also be protected. And really opened up the eyes, I think, of a lot of people about gender stereotyping in our law. Since then, obviously, after her time on the court, many very significant opinions, and in recent years, unfortunately, her most significant opinions have been dissents, but they have been clarifying and have been passionate, and have, in certain cases, led Congress to change the law because they understood that the Supreme Court had gotten it wrong.
Caroline, we seem to have a little bit of trouble with the audio, so we're going to try to maybe patch in again with you in a second. Apologies for that.
Okay,
it's dipping.
absolutely.
It's dipping in and out. Stuart Haugen, we heard Caroline Frederickson mentioning her friendship with the late Justice Antonin Scalia, and they were ideologically opposites. And the fact that so many people are bringing that up today, is that a reminiscence of a time that's past?
I'm sorry, but I fear that it is. I think it's a wonderful, at least historical perspective on the fact that you and I or others could have a violently different point of view ideologically and still respect each other on a human plane. And I don't see much of that today. I see in my own communications and others, mine not being the most important, but that where people are, it's become, if you don't agree with me, you're an idiot, and you're intolerant, and you're a racist, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think the two of them were a contrast to that, and I wish that we could, if we could, clone that framework and pass it along, and still guard the differences in terms of point of view.
Lex Paulson, your thoughts on what this moment means?
So I think what Carolyn said about Justice Ginsburg and the complexity of her legacy, that she wasn't just a champion of women, she was a champion for the equal treatment of both men and women, shows, I think, the incredible sophistication of this woman. And it gets a little bit to what you're saying, that in an age now where everyone has to be in one specific category and they can never leave that category, Ruth Bader Ginsburg knew how to be a moderate when that could help her accomplish her goals. She knew how to be more radical revolutionary when she was the second woman law faculty in Rutgers, and she fought for against discrimination for pay at her law school when she was fighting at the ACLU. So this is a woman who had many shades and many sides and knew how to advance her principles. And I think in a time when now we're getting more and more extreme and more violent in our public discourse, I think her example is incredibly important.
I'd only like to add, though, the words you're using describe to me or document to me the downside that I would attribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the lead Congress to this, to do that, which is frankly, constitutionally, in any way, shape, or form, is not the role of the Supreme Court. You are not there to guide, lead, or other. You are there to take what was given to you by the Congress and to interpret it.
Sure. I guess I was talking about her role as an advocate before she was on the Supreme Court.
Well, she was an advocate on the Supreme Court too, and everybody acknowledges that, and that's one of the reasons she's so highly regarded.
As are many justices, according to
Yeah, and it's a sad thing that that SCOTUS has become a state of advocacy.
both of you mentioning that polarization as the sun rose on a new week in Washington. Protesters made their way to the Supreme Court earlier this Monday, just as Donald Trump was telling Fox News he would make his decision on a replacement for Ginsburg by Friday or Saturday. The U.S. president, who promised a successor, had a weekend campaign rally.
Who I haven't chosen yet, but we have numerous women on the list. I built this incredible list of brilliant people, and we're asking for Biden's list. He can't give it. You know why? Because if he ever gave a list, he'd either put somebody in the left middle, which would be okay, you could get votes, or he'd put somebody, which is what he's going to choose, so far left. Now, if he did the left middle, he loses his entire left coast, right? And if he loses the left coast, that's the end of his election.
Lex Paulson, your thoughts on the way the process now will be unfolding?
Well, it's a very delicate time for Republicans, several of whom in the Senate are trying to win re-election in states where Biden currently has a decisive lead. In places like Arizona and Colorado, those incumbents are going to be faced with a tough choice. Do they give this snap validation of a nominee from Donald Trump and risk a backlash in their states? Or do they go along with the pact that many Republicans made who didn't like Donald Trump personally, but were willing to support him in exchange for conservative appointees to the bench and lowering taxes and deregulating business, et cetera? So a lot of Republicans are going to have a very difficult time making that choice, but I suspect that ultimately they were going to push this nominee through, and it's going to lead to an escalation between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. The Democrats, if we retake the Senate in November, will have the possibility of abolishing the filibuster, of giving statehood to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, who currently are taxed without representation now, and of expanding the size of the Supreme Court, something that's happened several times in American history, and given the polarization of the Supreme Court and its shift to the right, is well within the legal and constitutional possibilities of the Democrats. The question is, do Republicans want to take already a difficult situation in the Senate where they're breaking norms, they're breaking the own precedent that they announced in 2016, and make it worse? I think the answer is yes. Mitch McConnell will do that because he just wants to see another judge confirmed, but this really does raise the stakes in the U.S. Congress.
I think it's more complicated than that. The Democrats are going to try to put D.C. and Puerto Rico in play for four new permanent Democrat senators and a handful of Democrat House representatives. I don't think there's a question that they're going to do that. That's a done deal. Whether Republicans follow on with this candidacy or not, the Democrats are going to go for D.C. and Puerto Rico.
So just explain to our viewers, February 2016, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, his choice for a Supreme Court justice, the majority leader of the Senate says, we're not going to hear his
Merrick
case. Merrick Garland, because it's too close to the election.
And that was 9 months before the election.
Well, actually, that was based on a precedent that Joe Biden himself had stated.
What's changed since?
Several years. The difference that both the president, I think it's a little confused, and I'm not sure I want to hang my hat on either one of these presidents. Politics is if you've got the power and you can get it done, go get it done. Are either of you actually going to suggest to me that the Democrats, in a reverse situation, would not be put forward and confirm I don't believe, you can't say, looking me in the eyes, that the Democrats would not jump on this with lust and vigor. So the point really is, to me, it's going to happen. And they're also going to pack the Senate by putting they're going to try to put 4 new Democratic senators in for life. with D.C. and Puerto Rico, which will result in a handful of new Democratic reps, and they're going to pack the court anyway.
Caroline Frederickson, it's power, right? It's a power play, as is all politics in every country around the globe. This is just the normal state of affairs?
Well, let me just start by saying many times the Republican leadership has said things that gone back on their word immediately. I don't think that's been the case for Democratic leadership, and I'd like to see some evidence
Sorry,
of that.
excuse me, I have to laugh at that.
Mitch
Anyway.
McConnell, I haven't had a chance to say a thing in this whole discussion. So
I'll shut up now,
please
excuse me,
let
but
me
the
speak.
idea that Democrats don't go back on their word.
Caroline Frederickson.
So immediately after Justice Scalia dying, which was in February of 2016, Mitch McConnell tweets out, there'll be no consideration in an election year. Much later on, he revamped that to say it's because the presidency is in the hands of one party and the Senate is in the hands of another party. But that was not the original indication. Lindsey Graham, in fact, also said in 2016, if I'm chair of the Judiciary Committee, and there's a vacancy at the end of a Republican president's presidency, I'm not going to have a hearing and I'm not going to move forward. And of course, he just said, no, that's not true anymore because of something that happened 3 years before I made that original statement. I mean, it's just, okay, so, politics is power, I agree, but hypocrisy of this enormousness, is rare to be seen. I mean, I'm not surprised because this has been the way that they have behaved over and over as they obstructed Barack Obama's nominees for so long. But I think we just have to be clear about how differential it's been. And some people say the Democrats have been too weak because they haven't opposed power directly with power, but they've had a lot more respect for the idea that the courts are an independent body and should not be caught up so much in politics. But if that's what the Republicans want, I suppose that's where this is going to go. But it's really sad that so shortly after the death of a great justice like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we get down into the swamp that the Republicans have created.
The swamp. We'll pick up on that point when we come back.
Thanks.
Stay with us.
Thanks.
You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and the surprise came Friday night with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg at 87, the Supreme Court justice who Donald Trump wants to replace before Election Day, or certainly before Inauguration Day. Donald Trump, if he does, will have named 3 Supreme Court justices. There are 9 who sit on the bench in the United States. We're talking about it with Caroline Frederickson, who's in the Washington suburb of Silver Spring, a visiting professor at Georgetown Law School. Thank you for being back with us. Thanks as well to Stuart Haugen, member of Republicans in France, and Lex Paulson, lecturer at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. The U.S. elections are November 3rd. Well, except they've already started in some parts. The lines ran long indeed during early voting, not too far from where Caroline is, in Fairfax, Virginia, last Friday. Remember, it's a race that pits Trump against a veteran of Supreme Court justice nominations, Joe Biden, involved in many such a fight during his long tenure as a U.S. senator.
Trump wants to put forward a name now. The Senate should not act until after the American people select their next president, their next Congress, their next Senate. If Donald Trump wins the election, then the Senate should move on his selection and weigh the nominee he chooses fairly. But if I win this election, President Trump's nominee should be withdrawn.
Lex Paulson, is this the issue now, between now and November the 3rd?
I have to say, this is what Donald Trump wants the election to be about. Let's not forget that sometime in the last few days, the 200,000th American we think, passed away of the COVID-19 virus, a crisis that was scandalously mishandled from the earliest stage by a president who said it was going to magically go away. That should be the number one issue on everybody's mind, is having a competent government that believes in science and that will take public health seriously. But to the degree that Republicans can spend the election talking about abortion and culture war issues, it does benefit them. But the message to Democrats should be having a Supreme Court that reflects the constitutional traditions of America and the views of the American people is important enough to vote. Even if you didn't have good enough reason with the COVID-19 crisis, the economic collapse, that this Supreme Court vacancy gives an even more greater urgency for the many millions of Americans who don't participate, including, by the way, 6 to 8 million Americans living abroad, which if we were a state, would be the 20th largest state in the union, about as large as Wisconsin, and only 15% of us vote. So every single American, there are nonpartisan resources, fvap.gov, the Federal Voter Assistance Program. Every single American abroad or in America should vote. And I think even
I
she would agree with me there.
completely. I could support that completely. The fact that
Is
people
this-
abroad don't vote is tragic.
Is this going to be the issue now?
I don't think it should be, but I suspect it's going to become the issue. I would remind people, something that Democrats are tending to gloss over right now, is that a president of the United States is elected for 4 years, not 3 years and 9 months, which means that while we call it a lame duck, the media and many people call it a lame duck session after the election, the president is still in control until January, until he's replaced. And I think that what we're missing here is the fact that he is still the president of the United States. And can you imagine truly coming out of a contested election with a court that's hung 4-4? A Supreme Court that's hung 4-4? That's an
extremely
ugly,
dangerous.
that's an ugly situation.
What Stu says is exactly right.
I don't know if you're having a problem with my audio. Or
We can
if
hear you
that's
loud
why
and
I'm
clear,
not
Caroline.
Able to speak to you, but I wanted to say two things. One is, of course, after Justice Scalia passed, the Republicans had no problem with a 4-4 court. So it's an interesting that now all of a sudden a 4-4 court is a big problem. But again, just put that in the column of gross hypocrisy. But I did want to pick up on the point about whether the court is actually, how much that's going to affect the election. I mean, I think it's certainly something that for Democratic voters has become more important in recent years, and we see that in all the polls. But I also think for the few of the cases that the court is going to be considering this term, most importantly, related to the point about the pandemic and President Trump's miserable handling of the pandemic, is the Affordable Care Act case that's going to be in front of the court. And to make it, I think, to connect those issues is sort of the deep and personal issue that people have, the fears about their own and their families' well-being, and connect it to the Supreme Court and the fact that this conservative court might now decimate the remainder of the Affordable Care Act and thus healthcare for so many millions of Americans in the middle of a pandemic, I think is going to bring the issue really much front and center, even if it's not as much about the court as it once again reinforces President Trump's absolutely bumbling and not only bumbling but malicious approach to the pandemic.
So, Caroline, you disagree then with Lex Paulson, who says that making the election about the Supreme Court nomination might play more towards the Republicans' favor.
Well, I think that the trends are very strong, showing that Democratic voters actually care deeply about the issues that the Supreme Court addresses, as well as about the Supreme Court itself as a body. Who it's going to motivate more, it's hard to say. But I do think, I was saying the connection of the issue of the Supreme Court determining the future of the Affordable Care Act, an issue that is right now in front of the court, and the pandemic and President Trump's mishandling of the pandemic, I think connects them in a different way. It makes it more about Donald Trump and the pandemic than necessarily specifically about the court. And that's why I think it's different in this particular election.
And a point to underline what Caroline just said, is in 2018, the last time we had a Supreme Court controversy around Brett Kavanaugh, who was accused of sexual assault and still became a Supreme Court justice. That had a very positive effect on voter turnout. In fact, we had the largest voter turnout in 2018 in a midterm election in decades. And so this also could play in the favor of Democratic turnout.
Stuart Haugen, so let's say they do speed it up and bring it up for a vote, which, by the way, would be quite a feat.
It's quick, but it's been done 3 or 4 times before. Yeah.
Well, Gorsuch was 65 days it took between the day of nomination.
You have to go back.
Kavanaugh, 90 days, I'm seeing. So
well,
it's
on that, it was because, if you want to spend your time doing what we're doing right now is Democrats already throwing negativity.
But assume
that could take longer.
Assume a few Republicans cross the aisle and do say, hey, let's not have the vote now. Let's wait till after the election. Should Donald Trump make what hasn't been done since the days of Eisenhower, that is a recess appointment?
I didn't even think about that. That's a very good question. If I were him, I would do it. I would do it because going into the elections with 8 justices and Justice Roberts floating in the wind, I would suggest that we would be headed for a frickin' disaster.
I'm about to do something I've never done before on this show, which is argue the case for Donald Trump on this. I think Stu has a point, which is if Republican voters are thinking about the Supreme Court as something that still hasn't happened yet, they're more motivated to come out than if Justice Ginsburg nominee replacement is already on the court. And so in a sense, Donald Trump wants people thinking about this appointment on Election Day and not have it be resolved before then.
Caroline Frederickson, just a reminder for our viewers, a recess appointment means that if Congress is not in session, whoever the president picks can stay there for 2 years, right?
Yes, although it's a very, the court has limited the ability to make recess appointments quite a bit in recent decisions. And so I think it's highly unlikely. And also, certainly if Joe Biden wins and it's a recess appointment and it lasts for 2 years, there ain't no way that justice is going to be renominated. So that might be a drawback for Donald Trump, as I think you're suggesting in the way you framed your question. It would be absolutely unprecedented. I actually think, I wouldn't want to advise Donunk Trump. So
we are swimming in uncharted waters.
Probably not listening to this broadcast, but I think it makes a lot more sense for them to nominate and then, as was said, to use that to sort of generate excitement in the base and then have a vote in the lame duck session. The lame duck session, for the viewers, is one in which the current Congress actually continues even though the election has happened, so that members who may have been defeated or new members elected the new members don't participate, the old members do participate. So it's the current makeup of the Senate, which is in Republican hands.
But
so
let's be sure that we understand that what you and I and other people in the media, and I'm not in the media as such, but what we call a lame duck session has nothing to do with legality or power.
But there's an interesting point here, which is that
because the president's elected for a term of 4 years, not 3 years and 9 months, and others are elected until January, whatever it is, the 20th, when others replace them. This is not something that you just say, oh, we call it a lame duck session, therefore they have no power.
It's true. It's a norm. It's not a law. Stu is absolutely right on this point. But there's an interesting nuance here, which is that in the state of Arizona, their Senate race is a special election, which means that if Mark Kelly, the Democratic nominee, and the astronaut, and the husband of Gabrielle Giffords, the congressman who was shot in the head 10 years ago when I was a congressional staffer, if Mark Kelly wins that race, he takes office not in January with the other senators regularly elected, but he takes office in the end of November 30th.
Yeah, and that is a unique situation.
You already have Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, 2 out of the 4 Republicans we would need to hold back on this, stating that they will not support a nominee before.
Do you trust a politician stating something as opposed to voting something?
This is a good point, Stu, because you're saying that politics should only be about doing what you can get away with, and in fact,
I don't agree with that. I don't buy that. I really don't. I'm just saying that's reality.
That statesmanship is possible. That doing something that's in the interest of the country.
Are you kidding? In today's environment, statesmanship is possible.
This is what Trump has given us. Trump has lowered our standards so much that
Trump has done it.
That statesmanship is even possible anymore.
Trump is part of it, but he has not done it.
No, America exists because there are people
let me
who are
just
willing to do
say,
something.
if I could
Schumer,
intervene in this
others.
catfight here.
Oh, I know. You have a point of view. You're entitled to it. That's why you're online.
All right,
But it is not true.
Politics is more than just doing
Can
what
I
you want.
intervene for one
Catherine
second
Frederickson.
just to say, I think this debate really highlights how problematic our Supreme Court is. The fact that it is so politicized, it's meant to be an independent body. I think, I certainly would advise that one of the first things President Biden does in the Democratic Senate that's coming in is to change the rules and to work to set up 18-year terms for Supreme
He doesn't
Court
have the right to change those
justices,
rules. You're
no
crazy.
longer life
This is
terms,
constitutional.
18-year
This is
terms.
not Joe
We need to
Biden's wishes.
Totally upend this process because it is so broken.
But this is not Joe
Absolutely
Biden's
broken.
wishes.
but-
Look at the
one at a time.
This
the
is your
pulling and
wishes,
pushing
not Joe
on
Biden.
Supreme Court justices
It
who
can't
are
be
meant
done.
to be above politics.
If
And
you
in
don't
fact,
like the
they are in
Constitution, there are
the
3 mechanisms for changing it. Go ahead and do
The
it.
Constitution does
one
not
at a time.
specify the length of a Supreme Court justice's term. We should all read Article 3 one more time.
I will do that. I will do that.
Because
But
that
it's
is
not Joe
It
Biden's
does on good
decision either.
behavior.
Stuart,
And it also doesn't specify the size of the court. So the other thing that Democrats
Well,
are
that
gonna
worked
do,
pretty well for FDR,
is
didn't
expand
it?
the court,
Packing the court.
and add justices, and that will be some level of effort to rectify the packing of the court.
Do you
that's been
support
done by
that?
the
Packing the
Republicans.
court from the Democrat side?
Packing the court's a phrase like the death tax,
Do you support,
where no one could be
do you
for
support that idea?
No, the Republicans have packed the court. The Democrats would
When did the
legitimately, under law,
Republicans pack the
expand number
court?
of justices,
Explain
as
that to me,
said.
because I think I follow
The court
history
is
pretty well.
not
Just
fixed
one at a time,
9.
one at a
It could
time.
Be any side.
When did the Republicans pack the court?
When they put Justice Gorsuch on the
No, that's not packing the court. That's replacing through
Merrick
legal
Garland's
process
seat.
a justice. That is not packing the
If we're going
court.
to take a strict construction approach, you have to look at what's in the Constitution. And what Professor Frederickson's saying is absolutely correct. Congress has the right to set both the number of justices and the length of their terms. And the fact is, when there's a political problem in America, we should evolve our institutions. We shouldn't just keep it because it's been there for 200 years. The French are on their 5th republic,
because
and they're much better governed
because you
country
don't
right
like
now than we
losing
are.
elections, evolution.
All right, let
is
me just
packing the court.
let me just bring in Carolyn Frederickson here, because it is difficult. And you said in part one of our discussion that you taught here in France. It's very difficult for us here to understand what Lex is talking about. The fact that, again, this document that's 231 years old is considered by both sides, right, Democrats and Republicans, as sacrosanct. Why?
Well, I think what we're proposing is actually not to change the Constitution. It is merely to change the way this court is structured.
Exactly.
which is permissible
Reinterpret
under
it
the
because you can't
Constitution.
change it.
To change the size of the court, which is not specified in the Constitution, as well as to adjust the length of service of Supreme Court justices, which is also not specified. It says under good behavior. So, I think, but what the point for your viewers is that our situation is unique in, number one, having Supreme Court justices who serve so long. Normally, there are short terms or shorter terms that are set in most countries of the world for their highest court.
Except
But
in the
also
U.S.
level
Congress
of
and
which it
Senate.
has
Would you
been-
change that
has
as well?
been involved in the political debates, which is also very unique and unfortunate. I, for one, would love to have a situation where our judges were completely outside of politics and independent.
Stuart Haugen.
And I want to work towards that.
Stuart Haugen, let me ask you.
Sure.
Here in France.
By the way, I'm in violent agreement with you about the idea of getting outside politics. I just don't know how you do it.
Here in France, the highest court is the Constitutional Council. You're elected to 1 9-year term.
I love that idea. Do that, and then stop senators and congressmen for surviving for life. You've already limited the president. Let's get people in and out of Washington and done with the deal.
Republicans talk a lot about American exceptionalism. You know what's really exceptional about America? our founding fathers exercised more political imagination and creativity in designing our Constitution than we properly appreciate. And Thomas Jefferson said, we're designing a Constitution that should be redesigned and rethought every generation, that no generation should be bound by the decision of their ancestors.
And that's why there are three ways to change it.
It's our time now. With gerrymandering, with the way we vote is a scandal.
Of course, and gerrymandering's a scandal.
Is a campaign finance is a scandal. And Americans should think systemically and do what our founding
But
fathers
let's
did.
follow the Constitution because it creates multiple means to do so. Let's not ask for executive actions and stuff.
I've just outlined the ways that you can change the court without actually changing the Constitution. It's there. And again, the Supreme Court size has changed many times over our history.
Is it a good idea?
That is certainly something that a Biden administration could do. And so let's not get bogged down.
But is it a good idea?
One second.
Because you're losing.
How we amend our Constitution. It's not necessary here. We can actually fix a lot of the problems of the court without having to.
What
go
are the
that route.
problems
Just
with
before-
the court?
What
are the problems with the court?
In the United States.
The problems with the court are because they don't agree with you.
That in great numbers. And so it's something I think that will definitely is going to be under consideration, and I hope that the new Biden administration moves forward.
All right. With Donald Trump already alleging voter fraud and the Democrats pointing to voter suppression in many key states, as our panel has said, thoughts turn to, say, the 2000 presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, which was ultimately decided along partisan lines by the Supreme Court when it refused to allow a recount in Florida's tight race. What if there are several Floridas this time around, something people have been thinking of? And just one last point, and I'll put it first to you, Lex, before. There's a survey out by the University of Cambridge's Center for the Future of Democracy, which shows how in the United States, faith in democracy continues to dwindle. Is that why is that?
Well, people see a growing divide between the people they see making decisions and their own priorities in their own lives. I mean, this is, in a sense, a feature, not a bug, of American democracy, is that it wasn't designed to be a democracy. It was designed to be a republic. In a republic, you elect an elite to govern. And a lot of Americans, both on the left and the right, do not feel like the governing class is representing what real people
Why do you say it was designed to elect an elite?
Just let me finish. France, Ireland, other countries that are making steps to experiment bringing citizens into the policymaking process with citizen assemblies, mini-publics, the Convention Citoyenne. This is the future of democracy because citizens are not going to be happy with a governing elite class as polarized and corrupt as the one currently in charge in America.
I don't think that anything in the Constitution, remember the founding fathers who put this together were citizen farmers. They were citizen such and such. They went, people went to Washington to do their job and then they went home to grow crops. They were not elite lifetime politicians. That's the biggest problem we have in the world.
Let me bring in Caroline Frederickson. Are just a final word? Are we in a constitutional crisis, or is this just politics as usual?
I think we are in one of the most difficult situations we have ever been as a nation. And so, my fervent hope is that this election will clarify things, will present us with somebody who actually wins the popular vote and becomes president. And we can address so many of the problems that we face in America right now. Is it a constitutional crisis? It will be if Donald Trump tries to deny the results of the election. So we'll see where we are at that point in time.
What gives you any indication that Donald Trump is going to deny the results of the election? The only people who've denied the results of the election are the Democrats.
But he said so at rallies, Stuart.
No, he didn't.
The
Democrats are the only people who have denied the election of the people.
Reality.
What?
I think we have, you're definitely more
Hillary
than
Clinton and the
Trump.
Democrats.
One second, please, one more time.
Well, I can't let this happen. This is not true. What have Republicans done to oppose this?
I don't even know how to respond to that.
I know you don't, because there's no response to that.
But Stuart Haugen, we've seen all the campaign rallies where they've.
So what? He doesn't say he's not going to step down.
He's alleging voter fraud already.
Yes, and we already know there's voter fraud.
All right.
So anyway.
Stuart Haugen, many thank you. I want to thank as well Lex Paulson. I want to thank Caroline Frederickson for joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland. Stay with us. Media Watch is next.
Sorry.
And we say hello to Emerald Maxwell.
Hello, Francois.
As you can hear, it's impassioned.
Yes, it's definitely inflamed both sides of the political divide. And obviously, President Donald Trump has now says he will name his nominee to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg by Friday or Saturday. So that's basically when is this seat this left vacant by the Liberal judge going to be filled? Just days before Ginsburg herself, just days before her death, she dictated her fervent wish to her granddaughter not to be replaced until a new president has taken office. But on Fox News, Trump promptly questioned her making that wish. Here he is on Fox News. He said, I don't know that she said that, and suggested it was a lie orchestrated by Democrats like Adam Schiff. Reaction online to that has been very critical, with many blasting Trump for suggesting that Ginsburg's granddaughter would be lying at a time like this. This Supreme Court lawyer calls it monstrous. But most Republicans still seem set on Trump forging ahead with his nomination. And this right-wing journalist, for instance, she quotes Ginsburg in 2016, saying there's nothing in the Constitution that says the president stops being president in his last year, using Ginsburg's words against her in this case. Senate Majority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell has said that President Donald Trump's nominee to replace Ginsburg will get a vote in the Senate before the election. But a fact that Democrats say is hypocritical given his stance in 2016. As CNN explains back then, the GOP-led Senate refused to vote on President Barack Obama's nominee, saying it was too close to the election. And this cartoon shows that actually that was a whole 8 months before the election. In this case, it's only 45 days. So there's clearly a reversal of position there. This video is also doing the rounds. It's a video of Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, saying, you can use my words against me if there's a Republican president. This is back in 2016. If there's a Republican president and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination. But despite this vow, he now supports Trump choosing Ginsburg's successor. Some Republicans are defying Trump, though, such as Senator Susan Collins. Here she is saying on Twitter, we must act fairly and consistently, no matter which party is in power. And given the proximity to the election, we should wait till after the election to vote.
All right, both those senators up for re-election, but their constituents are not the same. Many thanks for that, Emerald Maxwell. We'll have more on this story, of course, as it continues to develop. I want to thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.